In this video, we're going to take a look at a purple ink by Akkerman. They're number 14. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, it really does help the channel out for you to check out the entire video. Also, down in the description are links to the purple ink playlist, so if you wanted to see more, you can get your fix there. I'm an ink guy. Let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleed, no ghost. No feathering, no spread. We get little spots of shading that show up in the stub, a couple of spots of shading that show up in the extra fine, and even a couple that show themselves through the medium. Now, very much the extra fine and medium are about the same tone. Actually, all three of them are right about the same tone. Not much tone variation here. Extra fine takes 8 seconds to dry and a medium takes 14. The scrubby for both do show some color variation. I think it's showing better to me than on camera. And we do get shading in the writing. Now the smear test you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Pilot E95S with a medium nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleed, minor ghost in a couple of spots. We have no feather, no spread, no shading at all, but the stub and extra fine are right about the same tone. The medium looks just a little bit darker. The extra fine takes 12 seconds to dry and the medium takes 27. Scrubby for both give no color variation and there is none in the writing, and the smear test says you cannot recover if you smear while you're writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see a very even covering of this purple as it moves up and gathers at the top. And it didn't move very far while it was doing that. Now the one on the right that's let dry for 10 minutes, it's almost like it flipped upside down. Most of that ink is really staying in the line, and as the ink moves up, it is depositing itself evenly on the paper. But it does show that this might be a little bit more of a resistant ink. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. No feathering, no spreading, no shade for the stub, some shade for the extra fine, some shade for the medium. Now the medium's darker than the extra fine, and the extra fine's about the same tone as the stub. Extra fine takes 8 seconds to dry and the medium 16. Scrubby for both do show a little color variation, and it does show itself as shading in the writing. And the smear test you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. This smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it basically performs fairly well. There is a little bit of spreading in the letters. The lowercase h has a couple of spots with some minor blowout. I do think you could get away with using it in a note-taking situation. I just wouldn't if I needed a highlight. I worry about losing things like that. Water reactivated only the top of it, really left a lot of the ink on this paper in place. Pen flush didn't do a whole lot more than water did, is starting to break it down a bit more, but a lot is left here. But it did only take water to clean it out of that pen, which is always nice. The 1/3 bleach solution that you are not going to need absolutely destroys this ink. The next writing sample is done on monokaki paper because it's my last chance to get this one in monokaki. No bleed, minor ghost, no feather, no spread. There is some shading that shows up in the stub. There's a few spots of shading that show up in the extra fine, not so much in the medium. The medium is the darkest tone on the page, while extra fine and stub are about the same tone. Extra fine takes 6 seconds to dry and medium 10. Scrubby of the extra fine does show some color variation where the medium shows none, which is what happened in the writing. And the smear test, that's a maybe on whether you could recover it if you smeared while you were writing. For the over 1,000 inks that have been tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Akkerman's number 14 has a viscosity of 1.46, so it is a bit wetter than normal. The next writing sample is done on Moji paper. No bleed, no ghost. No feather, no spread, no shade, just tone variation, where extra fine's the lightest, the stub is a little bit darker than the extra fine, where the medium is much darker than everything else. Extra fine takes 4 seconds to dry, medium takes 7. Scrubby of the extra fine shows some color variation, as does the medium if you looked at far left to far right, but neither of them show it in the writing. And the smear test, I do not think you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the over 1,000 inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and their realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. Akkerman's number 14 has an average dry time of 14 seconds, making it normal. The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper, a crowd favorite. There's no bleed through to touch the next page, but there is a lot of very heavy bleed in. This right here at the top really impressed me, because I actually figured looking at it that it should have touched the page underneath, but it did not. You just cannot use the back of the page. Now we get tiny, tiny feathers in the medium. Not too bad. I mean, there's a couple tiny ones I can spot on the extra fine, but I don't want to pick on this paper. It did very well here. The spread on the medium is a problem for me, while the spread on the extra fine is not. But it's just about how deep those lines are, or how close those lines are together. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the medium. It has no shading. It only took a second to dry. The scrubby shows no color variation. There was none in the writing, and the smear test, you can't smear it, so you don't even have to worry about it. Instead of finding inks that look like Akkerman's number 14, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a green ink because I like putting greens with purples. I went with Sailor Clown Green Yellow. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are a bunch of links to playlists for you to check out there. So what do I think of Akkerman's number 14? It's a decent purple that has a blue lean to it. It can shade, but it really doesn't suit this ink. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? I didn't care for its lighter tones that I was getting from some of the drier pens. So I would really go with a medium to wet broad or medium nib to really keep its purpleness. Now you're going to lose some of its shading, but it's going to give its nicest tone and not be too blue leaning. I hope you got something out of this video, and thanks for 3 years of watching.